If you want years of better sleep, then you have to upgrade your bedding during Bowl and Branch's annual summer event. Right now, you can get Bowl and Branch's best-selling, naturally cooling sheets with their best offer of the season. Feel the difference night after night of light and breathable sheets made with the highest quality materials. Shop the Bowl and Branch annual summer event now for 20% off site-wide. Plus free shipping on your first set of sheets at bowlandbranch.com with code BUTTERY. Limited time only. Exclusions apply. See site for details.
Morning, Al. Not the greatest of mornings. We wake up to the news that we digested yesterday, that the greatest goal scorer that this country has ever produced or ever is likely to produce, James Peter Greaves, sadly passed away. Your thoughts? Because Jimmy wasn't, just a player, any other player. He was the greatest, and you were lucky enough to wear Jimmy's shirt, his Chelsea shirt, and you were a pal of his as well. So, your memories of Jimmy?
I'd be lying if I said that I was a great friend of his. I wasn't. I was fortunate enough as a kid. I remember it goes back to when I was just even before I was apprentice, when I was training at Chelsea as a kid. Jimmy had gone then. I think he was probably in Milan by then. But I remember my dad's best mate used to come round and rave about Jimmy Greaves all the time. I mean, he was the greatest thing they'd ever seen at Stamford Bridge. And I remember Peter Osgood, when he got in the side, he was his hero. He was everyone's hero, and he was rather than say that he was the best, I think he was the most unique individual. He used to score goals that nobody else could score. You could have your Alan Shearers along the way, great goal scorers. I can't take nothing away from the likes of them, but Jimmy was supreme. He was a man that could pick the ball up on the halfway line and glide past people. I mean, there was nothing of him. He was tiny. He was just so unique, and he was a genius. And what I loved about Jimmy, and when I got to know him, and I played against him in my second game for Chelsea. It was my real debut, really, and it was at White Hart Lane, and it was. I remember running on the field at White Hart Lane. I played my debut the year before. We lost 5-0 at Southampton, and I hadn't played again for a few months. I got back in. I was thrown into the Chelsea team in the season 60, 69, 70, and Jimmy played that night, and it was I kind of looked at him, and he was some kind of a great inspiration, and then he was just one of those people that you might meet in your local pub, and become friends with. He had that wonderful gift. I call it a gift, the greatest gift one could be given, I think, and that was modesty. He was such a modest man, humble man, and the greatest goal scorer I've ever seen.
And also, when he finished his career, he went on to form another great partnership with Saint and Greasy. We'll come on to that in a minute. But Jimmy, he just had that knack of putting the ball in the back of the net, which is a great knack to have if you're a striker. But Jimmy never blasted it. It was often pace and place, wasn't it? He was just a true artist that got great balance. They say he used to go and glide. He didn't run past players. He glided past them. He was such a graceful player as well, wasn't he, Jimmy?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how we would get on today with all these back defences with them. When they park the bus and they got 10 defenders back. I don't know how we will get on the day, but that's neither here or there. But I don't, as I said to you before we went on air, they'll never really get to the bottom of Jimmy, and they can write books about him, they can do shows about him. But rather than the Saint and Greasy, I think he should have done a show with Bobby Moore. He was his best mate.
Yeah.
And I remember I told you about 3-4 years ago that I see a show one night when Jimmy met Bobby, and it was all about their friendship and how in 1970, when Bobby was left to rot in, with over the bracelet thing, and he was left under house arrest, and Jimmy was actually in driving a car through Bogota. He was in one of those rallies, and he found out about Bob, and he popped in to see him, and then he climbed over the wall and up a tree and went in the back door to see him and had a cup of tea with him. And he went, "What are you doing sitting on your own?" He says, "What are you doing here?" He said, "Well, I'm in the rally." He said, "No, I thought I'd pop in to see you." And he said, "Well, and anyone else been to see you?" He said, "No." So nobody has seen him. Ramsey didn't go and see him. The FA never went to see him. Nobody. Only Jimmy went in to see him. And the lady come into the house, and she said to him, "Excuse me, who are you?" And he said, "My name's Jimmy Greaves." He says, I'm on a rally." He said, "No, come to see my mate." She said, "Well, how did you get in?" And he said, "I went round the front." He said, "I see all the paparazzi there." He says, "I couldn't get through the front gates." He says, "And I didn't want to be noticed." So I went round the back. He said, "I climbed up the wall, jumped onto the tree, jumped down, I come through the back door, through the kitchen." And he said, "And I found my mate here having a cup of tea." And she said, "Well, go." She said, "When people come in here," he said, "they usually ring the bell." So she said, "You better go outside and ring and come in here properly." So she ushered him out, stood him outside the front door. She said, "Now ring the bell." And he rang the bell, and she opened the door. She said, "What can I do for you, sir?" He said, "Well, my name's Jimmy Greaves." He said, "And you've got my friend Bobby Moore under house arrest." And she says, "Well, what are you doing there?" She said, "I've come to visit him." She said, "Well, come in." So she took him in, and Bobby was sitting there laughing. And he had something they'd never seen before. He had half a beard on him because where he hadn't, sorted himself out. And she said, "Can I get you a cup of tea, Jimmy?" So he went, "I prefer a beer." She said, "Well, funny enough, I've got a couple of beers in my fridge." And she went out and got him a couple of lagers, and they sat down and they both started laughing. And he was under out. And that was the kind of friendship they had. And in the show, when Jimmy met Bobby, they made a pact in 1966 that wherever they were and whoever they played for on a Saturday afternoon, on a Saturday night they'd meet in the same pub in the East End and have a beer together, and they kept up to that pact from right to the end of their careers, and hence obviously Bobby getting Jimmy to sign for West Ham, and I think that kind of put the lid on their friendship, So it's a great story. He was such Jimmy Greaves, and it's such a great shame he didn't play in the World. England didn't have the best team in the World Cup in 1966 because Jimmy Greaves didn't play. And had he played, that really would have, we could have been talking them as having 5 or 6 world-class players in the team, but it didn't and when I see the film of when England won the World Cup and the camera zooms in on Jimmy, he looked a lost soul. I know exactly how I felt because, I missed the 70 World Cup and that was devastating for me. And I know Jimmy was devastated to be the greatest player it's a little bit like George Best being Irish and not playing in a World Cup. He was devastated every 4 years, being the best player in the world, and you got lesser mortals, playing in front of you. It's devastating.
And you've done a nice little write-up today. Stoke-on-Trent. Did Jimmy Waddington bring him to sign for Stoke-on-Trent for a night?
No, the headline there was they were kind of that was Stanley Matthews' testimonial.
Did Jimmy play that night?
Jimmy played.
It's against Real Madrid, wasn't it?
Johnny Haynes played. Jim Baxter played. Tony Waddington got all the best players. I think he might. There was a lot of the 1966 World Cup players played in it. Yeah. And Puskas played.
Yeah.
For the other team, Yashin and people like that, that was all down to Waddington. That was a kind of insight that Waddington had, and he wanted to put on the greatest night of all time at the Victoria Ground, and he did it. And Jimmy was a part of it, and obviously Bobby was a part of it. Johnny Haynes, it was only Waddington could do something like that. When you think, we're not talking about Old Trafford here or Anfield, we're talking about the Victoria Ground in the back streets of Stoke-on-Trent,
Absolutely. And you referenced Johnny Haynes, and you wore the number 8 shirt of Jimmy at Tottenham, and you wore the number 10 shirt of Johnny Haynes, two of your heroes when you played for England. You scored goals like Jimmy Greaves occasionally, and you passed
Yeah.
like Johnny Haynes very, very often and frequently, Al.
Yeah, well, I remember going to a dinner one night, and on the top table was Jimmy Greaves, Johnny Haynes, Bobby Robson, and someone else. They were, because Johnny Haynes played at Fulham with Bobby Robson, so they're all on the top table. And Jimmy, I always used to ask Jimmy for his autograph, and he used to swear at me, lambast me, or whatever you want to call it. And I would do it. The more he saw at me, the more I'd ask him for his autograph and say, "You're my hero." I said, but this night I said to him, "Jim, I wore your shirt at Chelsea, but I always wanted to wear his shirt." And I pointed to Johnny Haynes. I said, "I always wanted to play for Fulham and wear his number 10, but I ended up doing so against the Germans." But that was in a poxy old Admiral kit for Don Revie. So, I didn't get to actually put Johnny's Fulham shirt on, which I wanted.
And finally, you was at a dinner with Jimmy and Lester Piggott, and both of those, the greatest jockey and the greatest goal scorer of all time, signed your fiver. But sadly, young Alan spent it on a bottle of wine, didn't he? So, we're
Yeah,
never going to find that.
well, the other someone somewhere in the world is going to be walking about with that in their pocket, but they would never be able to find out who Lester Piggott is on it, because you could read Jimmy's writing because he was articulate. Lester could hardly write, and but it was it wasn't actually, it was a dinner. It was a signing thing in Olympia, and we was in Olympia in London, and I was sitting next to Lester Piggott, and he kept laughing at me because I was having a banter with the boys. And I asked, I turned around to him, and I said, I just pulled some notes out of my pocket, and I said, "Will you sign this?" And it was a fiver, I think. It might be a tenner. I think it was a fiver. And I said to him, "Lester, will you sign that for me?" And he kind of sat back in his chair and laughed at me, as much as to say, "But do you really mean this?" Because he'd been put in prison for tax evasion, I think he thought I was, taking a mickey out of him. So he ended up signing it. It looked like it was Arabic. Such was his bad handwriting, and he could hardly talk, could he? Anyway, he signed it, and I had it on the bottom of the fiver. And I was with a girl from Stoke. I took a young lady down with me, and we went down, had a bit of lunch. And as we come out the room where we had a bit of lunch, and I said, "You ain't going to believe this, love." I said, "But you see, I've just showed you the greatest jockey. Now we've got the greatest goal scorer in the world." And I walked over to him and said, "Jimmy, sign the top of this fiver for me." And he swore at me again. And I went, "No, Jim, please." I says, in front, her name was Tina. And I said, "This is Tina." I said, "Please sign." I said, "I've got the greatest jockey on the bottom, and I want the greatest goal scorer on the top." Anyway, he signed it. I had this in my pocket for weeks and weeks and weeks. I was down staying at my son's in Wood Green in North London, and I decided that I couldn't carry it about with me because I was going to spend it, or afraid I was going to spend it. And so I put a bit of blue tack on it, and I put it on the wall for prosperity. Anyway, I came in one day, and Alan had finished work a bit early, and he had no cash on him, so he took the fiver off the wall and went and bought himself a couple of bottles of wine and sat there and drank the wine. I said, "Where's the fiver?" He said, "I bought a couple of bottles of wine with it." I went, "Oh my God." So where it is now, we'll never know, Paul.
We'll never know now, but we know where Jimmy is. Jimmy is up there in heaven with Bobby, sharing that beer. And God bless both of our greatest players to wear an England kit. And what price would you put on Bobby and Jimmy now? They've got to be in the 200 million bracket, haven't they, Al?
Well, we as we say about our old mate George, there's certain players in the modern game, they'd be unbuyable, Paul. Like Jimmy went for 99,999 because, if you could imagine Jose Mourinho being about them days, he would have snapped their hand off. He would have wanted to be the first manager, for 100,000, But Bill Nicholson didn't want to be responsible for that, and he signed it for 99,999 for Spurs from Milan, and just about that should be on his gravestone, really, that number, because that would probably represent how many millions it'd be worth today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Uddy, till our next My Life, My Music. So think about 6 more tracks. I think we might be looking at 1972. Can I wish you all the best, sir, and have a great day. And we will speak soon. Cheers, pal. And God bless Jimmy. Thank you.
Yeah, every time. Thanks, Paul.
Cheers out. Ta-ra, mate. Bye-bye. Bye.
If you want years of better sleep, then you have to upgrade your bedding during Boll & Branch's annual summer event. Right now, you can get Boll & Branch's best-selling, naturally cooling sheets with their best offer of the season. Feel the difference night after night of light and breathable sheets made with the highest quality materials. Shop the Boll & Branch annual summer event now for 20% off site-wide. Plus free shipping on your first set of sheets at bollandbranch.com with code BUTTERY. Limited time only. Exclusions apply. See site for details.